Oh yeah. And now from North Platte High School Studio B, welcome to Bulldog Banter, where students, stakeholders, and alumni come together to traverse the transformative power of education. This week's episode sponsored by the North Platte Public Schools Foundation and the Flower Market.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Bulldog Banter. I'm Maddie Hildebrand, and this is the podcast where we do all things North Platte and do fun stuff. Today, our guest is Judge Barbara Hauser, who was this year's 2025 Distinguished Alumni. Hello, welcome to Bulldog Banter.
Thank you.
So
nice
today,
to be here.
Yes, today it is just me, so me and Barbara are going to have some fun. So last night was the Distinguished Alumni, so how do you think it went?
I thought it was great.
Me too. I had a lot of fun because I was there filming for Willie and taking pictures last night, and I had a lot of fun because we always talk about it with Terry, and like we had Tracy Trago-Dugan on the podcast last year, so I've always wanted to see how like it kind of went down, and I enjoyed it. Was it like what you were expecting?
I didn't know what to expect, honestly, but it was really a lot of fun. It was nice to see some folks that were from my graduating class. There were a few people there who actually graduated with my brother, and they came up to say hi. So it was a lot of fun.
I didn't know they were going to do like the auction stuff, so that stuff was fun. I can't believe how much some of that stuff went for.
And the auctioneer was fantastic.
Oh my gosh, I know. Like,
Yeah.
I want to know where you learned to do auctioneer stuff. Like,
I'm guessing, I don't have any idea if this is right, but I'm guessing that he's a livestock auctioneer.
okay, and so he just knows.
But man, he was terrific.
Yeah, he was good.
I have been to some painful live auctions
really?
where the auctioneers are not as talented as he was.
Yeah, no, he was good. It was fun. Yeah, and your speech was so great, and everybody else's. Yours was like, everybody's was just heartwarming and like touching, and everybody talking about North Platte and like being recognized. I loved it. And like your wife, like, do you want to tell me the story about how you guys met?
We are a later in life couple.
Okay.
Many of our friends are going on their 40th, 50th wedding anniversaries. We just passed 5.
Oh, well, you know what? That's okay.
It is okay.
Everybody finds the love of their life different times in their life.
Exactly. And so we met in Santa Fe, which is where we now live. And my across the street neighbor kept trying to set me up with people. And I kept telling her no. And her husband finally said to me, you know, you might as well just say yes because she's not going to leave you alone until you do. And so I did. They made dinner for Sarah and I at their home. And we really hit it off. And the rest is sort of history.
Cute. I love it. And yeah, she talked about she's an artist. She painted this, guys. Great. So do you want to talk about like your journey as a judge and how that started, like from North Platte moving on? Because you went to UNL, right?
I did go to University of Nebraska at Lincoln.
Then you were a judge in Texas, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about your journey throughout all that?
Well, I obviously it started here, where I moved to North Platte when I was in the 2nd grade.
Okay.
And went through the public school system here, went on to UNL, and from there went to Southern Methodist University School of Law in Dallas. And after I finished law school, decided to stay in Dallas. And at that time, there weren't very many women in large law firms in Dallas. I was the 3rd woman hired by my firm, which was one of the 2 biggest firms in Dallas at the time, and would be small by comparison to a big firm today.
Oh, gotcha.
And it has merged and evolved into one of the mega firms. But it was an interesting process. Growing up here, my dad, as I mentioned last night, was a small business owner. He had a lawyer, but you know what he did for my dad and other of his clients is very different ultimately from what I did. So I don't think when I went to law school I had any real idea of what being a lawyer might be like. But it was fantastic. I was with a great firm, really, really good lawyers, got a lot of good mentoring from people who were more experienced than I was, and ultimately the opportunity presented itself to take the federal bench, and that was also just a wonderful experience. Really, really challenging in many ways, but I was always a bit of a nerd and loved studying and loved the law. And so, I had reached the point after 20 plus years as a practicing lawyer where, I didn't have time to be the person who hit the library and researched all of the issues. People would do that for me, present me with their analysis, I'd review it, and so forth. But as a judge, I had the opportunity to really not worry about billable hours, not worry about how much time I spent figuring out the answer to a question, and really just digging in and always trying to get to the right answer under the law. And sometimes on a human level, you didn't love what you thought was the right answer.
Yeah.
But it sounds a little corny perhaps, but you took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States when you were sworn in, and that meant applying the rule of law as best you were able to interpret it. So even if I didn't personally love an outcome in a case, I always at least tried to come to what I thought was the legally correct outcome.
Nice. So
We're going to take a little commercial because we haven't done this configuration. You guys are. So I'm going to see if I can go into this. Oh, wait. Editing.
that thing is so stupid. That's usually mine, Mike.
Oh, is it supposed to hold the cord
yes,
up or
and
something?
it falls off every time, and it drives me insane. I wouldn't even try to put it back. Can't just give up on that thing.
Okay, sorry. You can pick up like it never happened.
Okay,
I'll
all
cut it
right.
out.
Anyway,
She's good at that, I'm sure.
so what was it like being one of the few girls? Because I love like women empowering. I love that it was 3 girls last night, the Distinguished Alumni. So what was it like being one of the very few girls there?
Well, it was, from my perspective, it wasn't, that big a deal. I wanted to be recognized for my achievements, not whether I was a female or a male. But certainly, predominantly people in my law school class were male. And actually, interesting maybe tidbit is the class that graduated 2 years ahead of me in law school sued all the firms in Dallas because of perceived discrimination in their hiring practices. So perhaps I was the beneficiary of that 2 years later. But, the firms were, I think at the time, firms were struggling a little bit. I graduated from law school in 1978, and I remember a very distinguished lawyer who became a very distinguished federal district judge said to me in an interview something that, would be so terribly inappropriate now. But I honestly I wasn't offended by the question because I thought it was sincere. I thought he was just kind of grappling with this. And the question was, well, how are you going to do this? How are you going to practice law, be a wife, maybe a mother? How does all that work together? And, my answer to him was at the time, I don't have any idea, but I'm pretty sure I'll manage it whenever it happens. So, it was different, but I think in many respects it was partially at least just really, the times were changing. Men of that next generation or older just weren't quite what to do with a woman who wanted to have a significant professional career and how people were going to balance that. And I think that's continued to be an age-old struggle of how do you balance life, family, and other things.
Women can do it.
Indeed.
So, what made you want to go into the bankruptcy part of all of that?
Well, it's a interesting, I guess, question and funny story. So, again, I came from North Platte, didn't have a lot of experience. My parents were not sophisticated practitioners of the law in any respect. And so, Perry Mason. I wanted to be a litigator. I wanted to be a trial lawyer. I was a debater in high school and college, and I really wanted to litigate cases. And what I found at a big firm in Dallas, excuse me, was that, I was sitting fifth chair on a big antitrust case as opposed to actually getting in the courtroom. And the partner who had been my mentor the summer that I clerked at the firm between my second and third years of law school was a bankruptcy dabbler. He was a litigator, but the firm didn't have a real specialty in bankruptcy at the time. And so he dabbled in bankruptcy. And so he got me involved in some of his bankruptcy cases that summer. And what I discovered was that I was getting a lot more experience in the courtroom on those bankruptcy cases than I was sitting in the library doing legal research or doing document review in a major lawsuit. And so it just was sort of a progression where within a couple of years, I was exclusively doing bankruptcy. And as luck would have it, when I graduated from law school, the new bankruptcy code had just gone into effect. And foolishly, I thought that meant that I was not at any disadvantage to the people who had been doing bankruptcy for a long time because we had this new statute and everybody had to learn it. And so this new statute was very focused on allowing corporate reorganizations, corporate restructurings. And so I thought I recognized an opportunity where bankruptcy, particularly corporate bankruptcies, would be a big deal. And it turned out that, once again, being luckier perhaps than smart, that turned out to be true. And so my practice just evolved from wanting to be in the courtroom, wanting to have the opportunity to appear before judges and arguing, to a practice that was both fun, exciting, and kind of the best of all worlds from my perspective. Bankruptcy combines litigation because you're in the courtroom a lot, but it also, at the end of the day, it's let's make a deal. It's trying to restructure debt in a way that allows a business to survive, to keep its employees, to continue to generate revenues for tax purposes and otherwise. And so fundamentally, you have to be able to protect the legal rights in the courtroom if necessary, but you're always trying to just negotiate a resolution that will work for people.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So is there like most memorable, could be a case, anything from law school, like your most memorable memory?
I've had a lot of really interesting cases. I think when I first took the bench, my practice was a pretty sophisticated corporate practice, and I didn't know very much about the consumer provisions of the bankruptcy code. It's just not what I had done. And I had a case early on that was an individual consumer case, and to this day, I remember it pretty vividly. And it was a woman who had assisted her husband in going through medical school. She was a very talented medical researcher, but when he finished school and they had their first child, she quit practicing, quit doing her work, and stayed home. And then, not an atypical story, he fell in love with someone else and left her. And she had a very, very, very difficult situation. And then he tried to prevent her from receiving a discharge in the bankruptcy case. And her story was incredibly moving. She got on the witness stand and testified because I had to make factual findings on certain issues. And her story was just incredibly moving to me. And she was very candid that she had had some mental health issues as a result of the trauma that she had gone through. And but then looked at me and said, "But I'm doing better." And I'll really never forget it. And a few days later, after I made my decisions in her case, I was going out to lunch with a couple of my judge colleagues, and we ended up going to a club at the top of one of the big bank buildings in town, and all of a sudden I realized that in the elevator with us was this woman in a pizza delivery outfit, and it was the woman who I had just dealt with, and she spoke to me, I spoke to her, and you could just tell that she remembered the kindness, the compassion that I had shown during the course of that hearing to her. And overall, it was just a really moving experience. And, that was frankly one of the smaller kinds of cases that I would deal with as a judge, but it has made a really lasting impact on me throughout the rest of my judicial career.
That's what I love about judges and lawyers, no matter what area field they're in. I feel like they're always changing people's lives. And
well, you hope so.
Yes.
You hope so. And, I have found that often people just need someone to listen. And something I always tried to do as a judge is explain my decisions in as plain English as a lawyer can speak, because, again, I often have found that if you just listen to them and they have an opportunity to tell their story, even if you end up ruling against them, if you make it clear that you were paying attention, you understood what they were saying, but unfortunately the law didn't permit the outcome that they would have been hoping for, I think people leave with a much better impression of the judiciary and lawyers than they sometimes have.
Yeah, sometimes people aren't very happy with
No,
you guys. I bet.
there's a lot of lawyer jokes out there.
I'm sure. So last night you mentioned Puerto Rico. Do you want to explain all of that?
Well, you may have remembered, although perhaps not, the city of Detroit filed bankruptcy, and a municipality is eligible to file bankruptcy. So the city of Detroit could file bankruptcy, and it restructured its debt through a municipal provision of the bankruptcy code called Chapter 9. There is no similar provision of the bankruptcy code for a territory or a state of the United States. And Puerto Rico had just terrible debt restructuring issues. They had over-leveraged the territory terribly and sold a lot of bonds in the public marketplace and were defaulting on them. And the parties were very much at odds between the creditors, the government of Puerto Rico, and the many instrumentalities that had issued public debt that they just were not in a position to repay. And so Congress enacted a special statute that is sort of bankruptcy-like, that allowed Puerto Rico to file under this special statute called PROMESA in federal district court in Puerto Rico. And the provisions of the statute, again, were similar to bankruptcy but different in material ways. And it was a brand new statute. So we were all dealing with trying to make sure we understood what Congress had intended when it enacted this statute. And because the creditors and the government of Puerto Rico were so at odds with each other, the statute put in what was called a federal oversight board. So basically, a group of individuals were appointed to oversee the financial affairs of Puerto Rico, impose some fiscal restraint on the government. So the negotiations became incredibly complex because you had the government of Puerto Rico who wasn't thrilled with the fact that a federal oversight board was put in to take away some of their ability to control their own destiny. And then you had the creditors, and you had 7 or 8 different instrumentalities with competing financial concerns. So it was a terrifically complicated situation. And Detroit, that also had a complex situation, had been assisted in their negotiations by the appointment of a mediation team. And so when Puerto Rico filed under PROMESA, the head of the administrative office of the courts and the judge who was presiding over it asked if I would lead a team of judges to try and help the parties understand what the risks and rewards were of their various litigation positions to try and help negotiate a consensual resolution, consensual plan of reorganization. And I sort of flat-lied to 4 of my judge colleagues because I told them I thought we'd work on this, maybe a couple of years. And sadly, it took 4.5 years for us to reach the resolutions, but we were successful in doing that. And of course, it's a credit to all of the parties that were involved in the process. Everybody had, you don't make deals in complex situations unless people give a little and get a little. So it was a bit of a tedious process, but we finally got there.
Nice. So with that and all the other stuff that you have done, is there like one thing that's like your biggest achievement? I know you do like a lot. So.
Well, I think recognition by your peers for your contributions is really wonderful. So I received, lawyers have what they call colleges. So there's an American College of Bankruptcy. There's an American College of Trial Lawyers. There's an American College of Real Estate Lawyers, Tax Lawyers. And it is a by invitation only organization. The American College of Bankruptcy, which I became a member of in 1994, recognized me as for its annual Distinguished Service Award. And it was given for, service within the insolvency community over decades. And I think that's probably the biggest deal award that I have received in my career. But this one's pretty nice, too.
Yeah, good old North Platte recognizing you, of course.
It is.
So I know you mentioned, like, it being difficult when you do feel differently than the way the law sees. So does that happen a lot, like your feelings getting in the way of, like, the way the law
I
thinks
think
you should do it?
That's a really good and tough question. I wouldn't say that it happens a lot, but I will tell you that I can think of a handful of instances where the law was an ass, right? The outcome was one that just wasn't just under the circumstances, but it was the legally correct outcome. My little rear end would have been reversed on appeal had I ruled any other way, and someone took it up on appeal. But I really didn't like it, and it was again a small business case. A gentleman had purchased a business, really put everything into the business, and at least I think there was pretty good grounds to argue that he had been presented with financial projections of what the franchise could do financially that were just false. And so he bought the business based upon these, what I think were probably false financial projections, and then did everything humanly possible to save the business. Took out a mortgage on his home, put all that money in the business, etc. And there is a provision of the bankruptcy code that does not permit shareholders to take anything unless creditors are paid in full. So there's a whole hierarchy of payment distribution in bankruptcy. So if you're a secured creditor, you're the best. You get to look to the value of your collateral. If you're an unsecured creditor, you're entitled to be paid ahead of the shareholders, who are equity holders. So they are the lowest priority level participant in a bankruptcy case. And this man and his wife were the sole shareholders of the business. And the senior creditors would not support his attempt to restructure his business in bankruptcy. And so I couldn't approve the plan, which meant that he was going to lose the business. And this is an example of where, I'd like to think my judge colleagues wouldn't do this, but it would have been easier to just write a decision and send it to the lawyers. But instead of doing that, I asked everyone to come back to the courtroom, and I read my decision into the record so that I could eye to eye communicate with this man. And he was in the courtroom with his wife and his son, all of whom were actively involved in the business. And, I just looked him in the eye and explained why I could not approve the plan. And of course, about halfway through, his wife burst into tears. I mean, it was a very emotional experience, but it was important to me that he understand that as much as I hated the outcome, it was what the law required. And I actually think, you never really know, but my sense of that experience is he appreciated, he appreciated the opportunity to hear from me directly, with me looking him in the eye and explaining why I couldn't give the family what they were hoping. But again, these are in the scheme of what my caseload generally looked like. These are small cases, but yet they've made a lasting impact 25, 30 years later.
Yeah, that's what I would feel like would probably be the hardest part for me, is having cases like that and having to go against what you feel is right.
Yep.
Have to do it. So how do you think North Platte shaped you as a person?
Well, as I said last night, there's something about the Midwest, in my opinion. You have really good people. They care about each other. They care about their families. And I think, generally speaking, for better or for worse, kind of everybody knows everybody in a relatively small town. Growing up, I knew that if I went someplace with a bunch of my friends and I did something that somebody didn't think was quite appropriate, by the time I walked home, my mother would have heard about it. And so, that restrains you to some extent, right? Because you know that everybody knows who you are, and it's a small enough place that people pick up the phone and say, hey, did you know that Barb was out doing blah, blah? And if my mother didn't, I would hear about it when I got home. So, when you're growing up in that, maybe it's a little chafing. But looking back, it's actually quite comforting to know that people in the community were watching out for each other's kids and would have helped. When I was growing up here, sort of left in the morning on your bicycle, and your parents assumed that you'd be at somebody's house at lunchtime and somebody was going to give you a sandwich, and just be home by dinner time. And sadly, I'm not sure that would be the case today, but
sure not.
But in any event, it's the community that I grew up in, and I think that the public school system here is quite good. I feel like I got a good education from teachers who cared, and as I mentioned last night, when I took the debate class from Connie Spence, it was a life changer for me. Not because I didn't love all my other academic subjects, it's because it just moved that ahead and really sort of guided me into what I was interested in doing, or at least thought I was interested in doing. So I feel like I really got a great foundation here. It's a good place to be from. I didn't have fancy museums that some of my colleagues that I worked with over my career might have had in New York City or Washington, D.C. or other places. but I feel like there were many other positive attributes here where I learned the difference between right and wrong, and I knew that if you worked hard, because I learned that from watching my parents' friends, you could be successful. You could do whatever you wanted to do and succeed at that. And those are wonderful lessons to learn early in life.
My thing with North Platte is, like, I feel like growing up, like, as kids, you didn't like it because there was nothing to do and it was so boring. But coming into high school, especially this podcast, has really made me, like, realize how great North Platte actually is. Like, I don't think we've had a single guest come on and say something bad or negative about North Platte. Like, you know, you need to cherish it while you're here. And, like, especially last night, too, like, seeing everybody, like, come together and all your guys' speeches was just so heartwarming. It just reminds me every time that, like, I really am grateful for the town I grew up in and the community. And it's just really great here. And I'm glad that people are coming onto the podcast and, like, making it known to our viewers as well.
So what are you going to do when you finish high school?
Yeah, so I'm actually, thank you, North Platte, because this high school gave me the opportunity to get into all this stuff, because this is what I love to do. I believe I am going to UNL. I talked about this on the podcast yesterday. I am still trying to figure out whether I want to do sports media and communication, because we do a lot of stuff with that, like the hype videos and, like, the games and all that stuff. It's a lot of fun, but I also really enjoy, like, the film side of it. So, like, when we make those short films and stuff like that, like, I always enjoy those. And me and Willie talked about it last night, like, college plans and as far as that. So I'm just really trying to hone in on what I really want to do this year.
It's early.
Yeah.
You don't have to make a final decision
I know,
for a while.
I know. But yeah, so I'm excited, and this podcast has, like, given me so many opportunities, so many people that I've met. Like Terry, like, she's helped me with so many different things. Like, I've put her as so many different references on, like, applications and stuff like that. And I just love the people that I've met, and I just love this podcast so much, and I'll always remember it. So,
Good. That's great.
So is there, like, any final advice that you want to give? Doesn't have to be about your career or anything, just the general public?
Well, I think, my best advice is be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Always be yourself. Be true to yourself. But dream big. I mean that. I would never have dreamed that I would have had the career that I had, become a federal judge, really, and now do the work that I am doing. The mayor said that last night. If you would have thought that I'd have been mayor and she'd have been a judge,
Which is so true, because I can imagine there will be people like that in my high school that I'm like, no way they became that.
Exactly. And but again, if you were at least modestly intelligent, pretty hardworking, and you have dreams, they can come true. And so, don't give up on your dreams.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast. Congratulations for last night.
Thank you.
And I'll see you on the next one, Bulldog Banter.